Hello, my dear students. Our lecture today starts with the last point that we have stopped with in the previous lecture, which is the point that refers to foreign language learning is a process of habit formation. This means that language is developed according to stimulus response reinforcement. In the classroom, stimulus is the material explained by the teacher. Organism is the language learner. Response is the learner's response. Learner's response could be either correct and provided with reinforcement, later on it will be developed into a habit, or incorrect, in this case it is provided with no reinforcement or negative reinforcement and it is not likely to be repeated again. A very important point that we should know today is that we have two types of language habits as language learners. Before we started language learning, we have our first language habits or native language habits. First language habits or native language habits. So after we start the process of language learning, we have the idea of target language habits. In this case, we have two types of habits that should be distinguished from each other: first language habits and second language habits. Previously, we have studied the direct method. Now we have somehow a comparison, simple comparison between the direct method and the audiolingual method. Number one, both direct method and audiolingual method are oral-based approaches, but the audiolingual method is different from the direct method in that, number one, the audiolingual method enrolls the students in the use of grammatical sentence patterns. This means that the teacher uses a lot of drills to help the students to practice grammatical structures. Another important difference is that the audiolingual method has a strong theoretical base in linguistics, presented by structural linguistics, and psychology, represented by behavioral psychology. As we start the experience of the audiolingual method, the first idea or the first drill that the teacher starts with is dialogue memorization. As we enter the classroom, the first thing we notice is that the students are attentively listening as the teacher is presenting a new dialogue. The students know that they will be expected eventually to memorize the dialogue. Here we have the idea of memorization. Memorization is important in the audiolingual method. It is related to a principle in behaviorism which indicates that language acquisition is imitation of adults. This means that we acquire our native language by imitating adults like parents, family members, and members of our society. And this is the way in which we acquire our language, which is imitation and repetition. That's why they think that this is also applicable to language learning. We can learn a language by repetition and memorization. So we have the idea of memorization to be available in the audiolingual method. Another important point is that all of the teacher's instructions are in English, which means in the target language. Sometimes the teacher uses actions to convey meaning, but not one word of the student's native language is uttered. Why? Because we mentioned that we have first language habits and target language habits that need to be kept separated. We don't want to confuse them. That's why the students should focus upon the target language habits in the classroom. She acts out the dialogue. She says, "All right, class, I'm going to repeat the dialogue now. Listen carefully, but no talking, please. Two people are walking along a sidewalk in town. They know each other, and as they meet, they stop to walk. and so on. Here, the teacher is explaining the situation in which two people are communicating with each other to tell the students about the context or the situation in which the conversation is practiced or a particular grammatical structure is used. From this, we understand that the students use the grammatical structure in a particular context. Then the teacher says, listen one more time. This time, try to understand all that I'm saying. Now she has the whole class repeat. Again, we have the idea of repetition. Repetition leads to memorization. I said that repetition and memorization are important. The class repeat each of the lines of the dialogue after her model, and they repeat each line several times before moving to the next line. Here, the first drill used is dialogue memorization. During the presentation of this drill, we have another drill, which is the expansion drill. What's meant by this drill? When the class comes to the line, I'm going to the post office, they stumble in their repetition. The teacher at this point stops the repetition and uses backward build-up drill or expansion drill. The teacher feels that the students have a particular problem with this line. That's why she uses a drill to help the students to produce this line successfully in a correct way. The purpose of this drill is to break down the troublesome sentence into smaller parts. The teacher starts with the end of the sentence and has the class repeat just. Repeat after me, post office. She starts from the end. To the post office. Going to the post office. I'm going to the post office. So this is a step-by-step procedure used by the teacher in order to give the students help in producing the troublesome line. Another drill which is used during the lesson, which is conducted according to the audiolingual method, is a chain drill. In this drill, the teacher takes 4 of the lines of the dialogue. In the chain drill, or this drill gives the students an opportunity to say the lines individually. First, the teacher listens and can tell which students are struggling and will need more practice. This is number one. And number two, this drill gives the students the opportunity to use the expressions in communication with someone else, which means with other students or with the teacher. Even though this communication is very limited, but we have the idea of communication to be available in the classroom. The teacher addresses the students nearest her with good morning. Students in turn responds good morning. The teacher, how are you? Students, fine, thanks. The teacher replies, fine. The student understands through the teacher's gesture that he is to turn to the students sitting beside him and greet her. That student in turn says her lines in reply to him, and so on till all the students have a chance to ask and answer the questions. The last student directs the greeting to the teacher. So this is the chain drill. She or the teacher continues to drill the students with language from the dialogue. But these drills require more than simple repetition. Now another drill which is used is the single slot substitution drill. This drill requires more than repetition. The teacher says a line from the conversation and then she indicates to the students that they should change one word in the line according to a phrase given by the teacher. The first drill the teacher leads is a single slot substitution drill in which the students will repeat a sentence from the dialogue and replace a word or phrase in the sentence with the word or phrase the teacher gives them. This word or phrase is called the cue. The teacher begins by reciting a line from the dialogue. I'm going to the post office. Following this, she shows the students a picture of a bank and says the phrase the bank. The students understand that they should say I'm going to the bank instead of saying to the post office. Then she gives them an example by saying I'm going to the bank. Then she provides the students with other cues, with different cues in order to practice the use of this line with different vocabulary items. Thank you very much. This is the end of our lecture today. In our coming lecture, by God's will, we will complete the experience of the audiolingual method.